Hello and welcome to why Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 is probably the best game on the PS1. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 is probably one of the best games to come out for the PS1. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 was released on September 29th in 1999. It was one of those games that kind of came out and had a big bang. It just kind of got everything right on the first try, one of those things that's very commendable for people who seemingly had no practice. That is, until you realize that the game was made by the same people who made Spider-Man on the PS1 as well. You might know Tony Hawk as that guy that looks kind of like Tony Hawk, but you know. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was also kind of released to great reviews and acclaim. A lot of people really liked the game, and that's because it got a lot right on the first try. It's one of those things that just kind of came out and did great. No matter who you asked, you'd probably be like, hey yo, do you like Pro Skater? And they were probably like, yeah, I like Pro Skater. Neversoft Entertainment was one of those video game developers that was founded in '94. Best known for the Spider-Man game on the PS1, as well as the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game. And would you believe they also did Guitar Hero? What? What the fuck? And after succeeding so well with the first game, they would obviously go on to make a sequel, and then another sequel, and then another sequel, and then a spin-off, and then a spin-off sequel, and another spin-off. Pro Skater 1 was the very foundation for everything that came after, obviously. It was the first in the series. The game created its own kind of genre of skateboarding games, and as a result, there's not really much to compare it to, aside from the people that tried to ape its success afterwards. But nobody ever did it quite as good or quite as well as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. The gameplay of Pro Skater 1 is one of those kinds of things where it's like, yeah, it's kind of clunky and yeah, it's kind of stiff, but it definitely is pretty cool, and right now there was nothing like it. When it comes to the gameplay, basically you go through several maps over and over again. Each map has 5 objectives. 2 are associated with high scores. 1 is associated with collecting all the skate letters. 1 is associated with finding the hidden tape, and 1 is level specific. For instance, you could be breaking down signs in Minneapolis, or you could probably do something else somewhere else. Completing objectives will earn you these tapes, and these tapes are what unlocks new levels. As well as skating, you can also customize what board you use, as well as the tuning of the trucks. This will change how easily your character turns inside the game. You also upgrade skater stats by going through their campaign mode. Basically, the more tapes you collect, the better your skater will skate. He'll go faster, he'll jump higher, things like that. If you collect enough tapes, you can also unlock Officer Dick. Get it? Officer Dick. He's basically a joke character. Most of his specials are also pretty easy to execute. After getting 3 gold medals, 1 for each competition in the campaign, you will get a video at the end showing your skater doing their tricks. This is also accompanied by a song from the soundtrack. Now, someone might think that it could get really boring to do the same 3 missions for every map, but that's not entirely true. The secret tape is hidden in different spots for each map, and getting a high score is often really fun no matter what map you're on. It's one of those things where it doesn't have a specific location, so you can just try and work up your score while you complete other objectives. The game doesn't really have a story beyond just do objectives in map and then move to next map. And honestly, it never really needed a story. It's one of those games that sort of feels like an arcade game. You've got the scoring system, the timer, and the soundtrack. It all kind of culminates in it feeling like it could easily fit inside an arcade cabinet. After completing a session on any given map, you will also have your scoreboard compared to a leaderboard. This does great in trying to incentivize you to get as high a score as you can, but can be easily broken once you know how screwed up the grinding system is. For instance, I can score 400,000 points on this map, and honestly, I don't think I was meant to do that. Along the way, you will come across certain maps that instead of having regular objectives will have a competition. Competitions are basically 3 different heats, and in each heat you try to score as high a possible score as you can. Most score attack objectives turn out to be easy once you realize that grinding is probably the most overpowered part of the game. When you skate, you're building up different combos, so the number of tricks chained together will multiply your score, as well as different amounts of spinning on any tricks in the air. When you go up a half pipe and then come back down, you cannot chain these together, but when you grind and trick and grind again on different rails, you will often get a lot more combos. When doing grind tricks, you're also required to keep balance by moving your character left or right on the rail. Along with gameplay, there's also this great mechanic whereby as long as you are near a rail when you press the grind button, your character will basically magnetize towards it. This means you don't have to be too precise, and it always aids to the flow of the game. You can also do a lip trick. You can do one lip trick. Check it out. You can do this by approaching any ramp and then holding up and the grind button at the same time. In your arsenal, you have flip tricks, grab tricks, and grinding. And on top of that, you also have special tricks that are unique to whoever you choose as a skater. Some of these can include backflips or special tricks you can do once the special meter is full. The special meter goes up the more tricks you do, but also goes down over time. It's really fun to jump off ramps and do tricks and specials and all that fun stuff. One complaint that I have is that the special tricks don't have a real guide or anything. They're all kind of hidden. You have to kind of experiment and find out how to do them. That or look it up online if you're lazy. The different stages consist of a warehouse, a school, a skate park, a city, stuff like that. At the end, it all culminates with you going to Roswell and doing tricks around aliens. Although this is kind of a spike, they don't ramp up to that. It's just a one level that's kind of weird, but whatever, you know, still pretty cool. No secret levels quite yet. Each map feels like its own thing and is a lot of fun no matter what. The first level is the simplest by far, but it is also a great example of different things you can do with your engine. For example, there are lots of half pipes everywhere that can also be grinded on. There's rails and different stuff to jump between. And this brings me to the gap system. The gap system is basically a free stack of points for doing a certain thing. For instance, some gaps require you to jump from rail to rail. Some gaps require you just to jump over large gaps in scenery. Some gaps require a little more effort. For example, this one in the warehouse level where you have to grind from this upper rail to this lower rail without falling. But these are great for boosting your score and your combo multiplier. Such a simple addition does great wonders in keeping the gameplay feeling fresh. A lot of fun is found just trying to see what different gaps there are in any given stage. There's also some odd quirks with the engine. What I mean by this is if you ollie into a wall and do a trick, it'll sometimes stall the trick. When it stalls a trick, it basically means that it'll register that you're trying to do it, but as long as you're touching that wall, it won't follow through. The animation might play, but the actual trick isn't being registered. It's a weird quirk of the engine, but I understand given the time constraints and the fact that this is the first game, they kind of get a free pass on that. Most maps are just free range, you can go wherever you want, but some maps have an end to them, most notably in the mall and downhill jam levels. When you reach the end, it just ends your current session. I don't know how I feel about this. On the one hand, it's fun to see how fast you can get to the end, but on the other hand, it ends the session early, and that's never a good thing when you're trying to complete objectives. They rectified this in later games by just warping you back to the start of the map once you reach the end. Now, a lot of people like Pro Skater 2 because it added quite a lot of different things to the systems. For example, in the first Tony Hawk Pro Skater, you cannot manual at all, so chaining together any land tricks is a lot harder than it is in, say, Pro Skater 2, 3, 4, or so on. The lack of a manual means a lot of your tricks will be grind-based, if only because of how much stronger it is to do that than it is to, say, go off a ramp a punch. The points you get for any trick will get lower and lower the more you use it in any given session. So you're basically incentivized to try and mix it up a bit with tricks and grinds and all that. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 does feel really nice, but coming back from Pro Skater 2, you can see how a lot of it feels stiff and unnatural. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 was one of those things where it was like magic in a box. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 is a great game to play and is great to come back to as well, especially if you legally own a copy. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 was my first Pro Skater game, but it's kind of where I learned all these different names like Bob Burnquist or Tony Hawk. Or Bam Margera. That is to say, the gameplay is really nice, but I feel like a lot of it is complemented by the soundtrack on display. Now, given the format of these videos, I'd hate to tell you, but I can't really show you any of the music. You're just gonna have to look up the soundtrack on your own. A lot of these are pretty classic. Now, the soundtrack kind of goes for a punk and pop vibe. For example, you've got the dead Kennedys right next to Goldfinger. But a lot of it just kind of works. It feels right when you're skating and you hear, "Here I am, growing older all the time." And the series would obviously continue this as it went on. A lot of the soundtrack kept to the pump kind of vibe and went off with that. The soundtrack is quite nice and it fits quite well, even though you got Goldfinger's Superman and you got the dead Kennedys police truck right next to each other. It does feel really nice to go out and, skate to these songs. That, and there are quite a lot of songs, and a lot of them are bangers straight through. On most levels, you'll find TVs on the walls that'll show whatever music video is associated with whatever music is playing right now. I find this pretty cool. It's an interesting way to spice up these levels and give them a little bit more pep. That said, most of these videos are 120p at 15 frames a second, but it's still a nice touch anyway. They also did some interesting things with the replay function. At the end of competitions, your last run is replayed while the scores are tallied up. And this is quite interesting to watch because you get to see yourself from all these cool different angles. When booting the game, you are greeted with a press start menu followed by a menu. In this menu, you can choose from a career, single session, free skate, 2-player, and the options menu. Under options, you can change a few things. For example, you gotta hand it to the developers, who are very forward thinking, as you can rebind your face buttons on the options menu. There's also a multiplayer option wherein you and a friend can skate in 3 different modes. Most of my multiplayer experience came from me and my brother playing Pro Skater 2. So I recognize graffiti, wherein you do tricks on different obstacles and they become yours, and it's basically like, see how much of the map you can paint. Next up is Trick Attack, which is basically just score attack. See how high a score you can get in 2 minutes, and see if you beat your friend. Then there's Horse, where you basically take turns seeing how many points you can rack up in a single line, and then try to see if you could beat your friend's score. You keep going, and every time you don't beat your friend's score, you get a letter of Horse. Aside from multiplayer, you can also do things like single session. In single session, you pick a skater and you pick a map, and you have 2 minutes to see how much score you can rack up. It's basically like any other campaign mission, just without the objectives. After that comes Free Skate, where you're allowed to pick a skater and then just go on whatever map you want without the time limit. Pretty nice to explore the map, if you ask me. And of course, as is tradition with most Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, there's cheat codes to screw around with. Big head mode, level select, max special, turbo mode, slow motion, random start points, things like that. And that about wraps up Pro Skater 1. It was a great milestone for the Tony Hawk series, and I'm glad that it came out. A lot of it does feel kind of stiff, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of it was laying the groundwork for Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is one of those games that just kind of feels a lot better, and honestly is a vast improvement over the first. A lot is added, and a lot of it is streamlined and made easier, as well as different unlocks. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 was kind of the favorite child, whereas Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 is kind of the red-headed stepchild kind of thing. You can tell a lot of passion went into making this game. It's one of those games that just kind of came out and landed its mark perfectly. The game runs smoothly, which is nice, so you won't see many drop frames, and a lot of it is focused on keeping that frameage up. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 is just kind of one of those games that still holds up today. I still go back and play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 a lot. I've completed all the Skaters campaigns more than once, and it's just a lot of fun to go back and do some kickflips over some trains and There's no real ultimate goal in Pro Skater 1 aside from just, complete the campaign. Do that, have fun. There's no real goal except for winning all the competitions with one character, because after that there's nothing left to unlock. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, because the price of admission is pretty nice, especially nowadays. You can find cheap copies online, and if you're a naughty boy, then you might just pirate it. The game is pretty short. You probably won't spend more than 40 minutes on any given campaign. The game definitely feels straight out of an arcade cabinet. The timer, the score system, things like that all contribute to how the game feels as a game. Each map will give you 2 minutes to complete any given objectives, although they do cross out once you complete them. So you could do multiple runs of the same map and you won't lose progress if you don't complete everything in one go. Although there is something to say that it is very satisfying to get all the objectives in one go, especially with that awesome sound effects they add on top of every time you get a tape. It's like The game looks alright, but that's par for the course for PS1. Everything looks blocky and kind of not smooth. I personally love the game. I had a lot of fun playing it, and it's a lot of fun to go back to every once in a while. It felt like they were still trying to polish it, but just didn't have the time that they needed to do so. But it definitely is a piece of gaming history and something to check out. In conclusion, I'd have to say that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 does still hold up to this day. Although, if you want something that feels a bit better, you might want to go to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Thanks for watching. I hope you appreciate the mini commentary video I put out. I hope to make a few more of these in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon. This will help fund these videos as they come out. You might notice that my channel is kind of a hodgepodge of different kinds of videos. For instance, I do commentary, I do these reviews now, and I also do, just overall movies and things like that. I hope to make more in the future, and supporting me on Patreon will help make it easier for me. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
I just noticed that Tony Hawk's board on the menu is kind of warped and looks kind of weird. I wonder if that was intentional.